Our next discussant is Michelle Brenner. Dr. Michelle Brenner is a pediatrician at the Children's Hospital of King's Daughters. She's a longtime ABM board member and breastfeeding medicine specialist. She's kind of been responsible for our international conference for many, many, many years. She's also a pediatric educator, works a lot with medical students and residents. She's on the board of the Children's Hospital of the King's Daughters and additionally on the advisory team to the King's Daughters Milk Bank. In her spare time, she's also pursuing a fellowship in integrative medicine, all the stuff I didn't know about you. And she'll be speaking today about her experience starting a new milk bank.
Well, thank you for the opportunity today. We're really excited in Norfolk about everything that's happened in the last few years, so I'm happy to share it with you. I finished my integrative medicine fellowship in January, so we can certainly talk about cinnamon and curcumin and acupuncture and anything else you'd like to cover later. All right, so have a handful of slides here today to just kind of tell you a little bit about how our program started. So this is the Children's Hospital of the King's Daughters. My husband and I landed there in 1994 when he started his pediatric residency, and I followed the following year. We are kind of situated in downtown Norfolk, right on the water, and we serve about 7 cities in that Hampton Roads area, and I'll tell you a little bit about that in a second. We are Virginia's only freestanding full-service pediatric hospital, and we have a 206-bed regional referral center. We cover all of our area of Virginia, plus northeastern North Carolina and Virginia's eastern shore. It's amazing how many people get sick when they go to the Outer Banks on vacation. The King's Daughters, and I think the reason this story is so interesting is I think we're really the perfect storm for a milk bank. The King's Daughters was started in 1897. It was women that belonged to a Methodist church in town, very affluent women who decided they wanted to begin to help the poor. And they started these circles, and the 14 circles were incorporated into the City Union of the King's Daughters back in 1897. You can see Miss Edith Nason. They hired her for her first year for about $600, and she walked the city of Norfolk and saw 1,700 families in that first year. And then it continued on. She had a few women join her, and they opened the visiting clinic, the children's clinic, in 1992. They opened the South Norfolk Health Station. And then began to offer her services on a bike. And then one of the women who belonged to one of the circles, her husband had a gambling issue, and he came home with $500, and she promptly took it from him and bought a car for the Norfolk City Union to see families. In 1915, the King's Daughters reported to the Virginia Board of Charities what they had given to families that year. And for $1,647, lots of milk, lots of ice. And I've been trying to go through the archives with the King's Daughters to find out, was that human milk? Was that cow's milk? And from the women at the meetings, I often get stories of their mothers that would actually go to the hospital when it was early as wet nurses for babies that were hospitalized. So there's lots of stories, but nothing documented that we've really found. So this wonderful tradition, the King's Daughters are still very involved in our board. They are many of the board members on our on the Children's Hospital board, and so they're very active. And there are 48 adult circles in the 7 cities of Hampton Roads of women in neighborhoods that just their main goal is to raise money for the Children's Hospital, and they donate well over $1 million every year. So the policy statement, thank you to Arthur and everyone who is involved in this AAP policy statement. This was the statement that we took to our administration to make change in our neonatal intensive care unit. In 2012, our statement said the potent benefits of human milk are such that all preterm infants should receive it. Mother's own milk, fresh or frozen, should be the primary diet, and if mother's own milk was unavailable despite support, pasteurized donor milk should be used. We went to our hospital with this conversation, and they said, this is the right thing to do, we're going to do it. We started purchasing donor human milk from several of the Humana banks, And in the first year, we spent about $5,000 to $10,000 per month purchasing donor human milk for our donor treatment program. I happen to sit on the hospital board. I guess that's my disclosure. And I was sitting with the King's Daughters Circle president in November, about 2 years ago. And the King's Daughters meet on a regular basis, and they love to have clinicians come and tell them about their work. And so I happened to say, hey, Catherine, we started doing donor milk in the NICU. This is really cool. We'd love to come tell the King's Daughters about it, thinking perhaps they'll fund our $5,000 to $10,000 worth of donor milk a month. As we prepared for the meeting, knowing the King's Daughters, I said to my now milk bank manager, I think we should probably put together kind of a business plan as to what if they say, could we build a milk bank? Maybe we should think about it. We presented in January of that year, and probably within a week and a half, I got a phone call that said, we would love to fund this venture if you guys are willing. So we didn't even really ask. We told them the story, and then we were gifted the startup funds to start our milk bank. So we became the 18th milk bank in the Himbana group. There are now a few more that have joined since then, and there's about 10 milk banks that are in the formation process at present. But you can see us immediately close to us is the Wake Med Bank. But there we are, right on the shore of Virginia. Just to briefly discuss, we kind of talked about donor selection, but it's a relatively rigorous process. We speak with moms very detailed on the phone. We're certainly looking for that voluntary, non-remunerated donor who is just doing this for altruistic reasons. They must be in good health, restricted medication list, no herbals. They must be providing milk for their own infant who is currently less than a year of age. Some of the milk banks will take milk up to age 2. We currently do not have the storage to do that, so we're still taking milk only up to a year. And because of composition issues, there's some discussion about that. Our donor screening methods, again, verbal phone interview, repeated paper interview with comparison, medical releases from the mom's physician and her infant's physician stating they're both in good health with no impact of donation of the milk on the infant's health. And then we do the lab serologic testing for HIV, HTLV, hepatitis B, hepatitis C, syphilis, with all of the things that Scott mentioned kind of on our list all the time. What do we do about West Nile? What do we do about Chagas? What do we do about chikungunya? What do we do about nicotine? All of those things come up on a regular basis. Infectious disease-wise, I have Steve Busher at my quick phone call anytime I need him, so we certainly have the resources that we need. One of the interesting things about our milk bank is that, and it's a blessing and a curse most days, our children's hospital is very risk averse. The good thing is we have internal counsel, external counsel. We have many resources from our microbiology lab, from Eastern Virginia Medical School. The health department has been very actively involved. So we certainly feel like our policies and procedures are as tight as they can be. We have a policy for just about everything in the milk bank, and it's written. Our consent that we actually give to hospitals who want to purchase milk from us started out at 14 pages. And it was a limitation for us because most of the hospitals were reading it, and it had safety stuff in it. It was like, when we give you our milk, this is how you will manage it. But the contract was so complicated that many of the hospitals were like, it has to go to our council, we'll get back to you. And then often we never heard from them. So we did have to simplify that significantly. We have ongoing discussions with our donors about hygiene, hand hygiene, storage hygiene, collection, all of those issues, again, that are going to impact the safety of the milk. All of the exclusion criteria are similar to the American Association of Blood Banking, which was discussed earlier. Moms are heavily screened every time they bring us milk. They walk in the door and we either verbally or hand them the questionnaire about tattoos in the recent past, transfusions, travel, all of those good things. So we just celebrated our first birthday on June 2nd. We were hoping for 100 donors in our first year, and we had no intention of selling milk outside of our institution in the first year. And in October, I was already like, oh boy, we are running out of freezer space. We have the most amazing community. So all of those 48 King's Daughter circles, many of those are women of childbearing age or grandmothers, and the donor pool has been phenomenal. We collect in a given week somewhere between 5,000 to 9,000 ounces of milk, and for a small bank, we think that's relatively impressive. and we really do virtually zero marketing. We have a Facebook page, but it's part of our hospital Facebook page. They're very controlling. They won't let us have our own. And so, but they do note that of all of the posts that they post for our milk bank, we get the most likes as far as hospital services go. In that year, we've received over 180,000 ounces of milk, donating 37,000 of that back to our NICU. We now have contracts with 18 other hospitals, primarily NICUs, but also those newborn nurseries, as I mentioned yesterday, who are trying to use donor milk as a bridge for moms who are increasing production for hyperbilirubin or hypoglycemia protocols. And we will soon be, our legal team, again, we love them, but they're a challenge, working on outpatient donor milk sales by prescription. The King's Daughters currently is agreeing with us to provide charity care for families who qualify. So our Children's Hospital certainly provides outpatient charity care services for any of our pediatric subspecialties based on income. And so we will do the same. Currently, that will be for Virginia and North Carolina residents, and we're trying to look at how we can fundraise for families who would be deserving of outpatient milk at a certainly reduced rate or free. These are our current milk bank donors. We have, again, 7 cities in the Virginia Beach area. It looks like some of those dropped off, but Virginia Beach is certainly our largest, followed by Norfolk and Chesapeake. And then the remaining 50%, we're now collecting milk from about 13 other states. And these are just some of the photos of our moms. 2 of our volunteers have subsequently become employees of ours, which is amazing. They are so dedicated and excited. It's probably the most positive and fun and energetic place I've ever worked. We walk in and everybody's just thrilled to be there. You can see that not only are we a huge military community and we have lots of moms who are married to military, but we often have our moms come in their combat boots, not only working to serve our country, but delivering us donor milk, which is really neat. And then I just have a handful of our slides of our processing. So our milk lab is in a relatively old building, but the milk lab itself was built for us. It's a really beautiful place with windows in the surround, and we actually get to look at the Lafayette River. This is Peaches, and she is proudly homogenizing the milk of 3 to 5 moms. It's mixed from flask to flask and swirled. She then puts that into the 4-ounce bottle aliquots, which are then induction sealed with the foil seal like you receive on your medication if you purchase that at the store. All of those bottles are then labeled. We use a electronic health record system called Timeless, which not only keeps track with that barcode, keeps track of all of the moms that go into that batch. It also keeps track minute by minute in our SteriFeed processor that the processing during that 30 minutes at 62.5 centigrade was the appropriate time, length. It tracks rapid cooling, and it's then frozen and placed into the freezer. So that barcode is very important. If there was ever a recall, we can instantly go back to that batch, find out exactly the moms that were in that batch, recall any of the other milk that they might have been involved in. Our hospital, again, the whole perfect storm, our Children's Hospital, everybody that we went to with this process was incredibly giving of their time and energy and expertise. And our IT folks, we have to keep records for 23 years about who receives this milk, and they were very helpful in setting up all of those processes with us. Here's the SteriFeed processor. It processes about 550 ounces at a time. You can see the probe that's in Ashlyn's hand, and that will go into one of the bottles to, again, do that minute-by-minute tracking. Future directions for us, we certainly are very interested. Since November, we've purchased about 7 more freezers because, again, the volume of milk we have coming in, shockingly, is greater than what we have going out. We're using about 1,000 ounces a week in our hospital now, and we're looking to expand that with our outpatient sales. But we're hopeful to help more hospitals set up donor milk treatment programs. We're happy to work with them from the beginning if they don't have one set up, share consents, share policies, share processes, talk about, should the milk be stored in the nutrition department of the hospital? Should it be kept in the pharmacy? How is it tracked? Currently in the state of Virginia, we do not have any insurance reimbursement. It's considered food and not medicine. So we would love to work with more Virginia hospitals to move towards reimbursement for hospital milk. We hope to, again, provide that outpatient donor milk by prescription. And then we met with our admin folks in April and basically said, where do you want us to go with this? Because we recognize that children's hospitals are not normally used to selling a product, and we have this opportunity, and we need to know, like, is this it? Are you happy with our small milk bank that's providing for us and a few others, or do you want us to go? And so they basically came back to us after looking at our financials and said, you're doing what we expect or we want you to do, and what would you like to do? And so we really looked at actually some of the information from the Gates Foundation, very similar to that conversation that Jana had yesterday, and decided that building that outpatient lactation center to support all of the moms in our community who are breastfeeding, and then hopefully add to our donor pool in the future, will continue that strength and support for breastfeeding in our community. So we are working on the Center for Breastfeeding Medicine in our institution. Last comment I just wanted to make, we do take legacy donations, so any mom who loses an infant in a NICU, or we will send a cooler. We recently had a mom who had an infant who passed in New Jersey. Mom doesn't have to go back into the hospital to get that milk. We'll send the cooler, arrange it between her. We still do all of her screening, but we'll arrange the cooler to get shipped into the NICU and have the NICU staff ship it back to us. And it's a really wonderful opportunity. So devastating to lose our son Daniel, who was stillborn at 26 weeks, but found comfort in healing and donating my breast milk to CHKD in his memory. So a really nice opportunity there. And just wanted to show off our website. Our phone number I worked very hard for was 668-MILK. It belonged to one of our asthma researchers. I'm like, you don't understand. I really need this number. And on this website, there are the brochures, and there are also some of them down on the counter downstairs. So just wanted to thank everyone for the opportunity to tell you about our perfect storm in Norfolk. And if you need any milk, please help me empty my freezers. Thanks.
Looks like Dr. Lawrence has a question. Oh, here we go.
Hi, I'm Christina Clefane from the Food and Drug Administration. I actually am not an expert on this particular topic. I work in one of our stakeholder engagement offices, but I know back in 2010 we had a pediatric advisory committee on this topic, and one of the things that they had recommended was to set up a registry to follow the patients that donate their milk or receive the milk. So I was wondering if either of your companies have done that. And I actually have a lot of other questions for you too, so I don't know if you want to just start with that.
We certainly track all of the infants that do get donor milk. We're part of in addition to our own inside tracking, we're also part of the Vermont-Oxford project. So that also keeps track of infants who receive the milk, and then certain outcomes, so necrotizing enterocolitis, retinopathy of prematurity, those things. So we certainly have lots of research opportunities to look at that data, but we have not done so yet.
We have several longer-term outcome studies that are underway right now. The initial study we did in 2007, I want to say we have about 100 babies at age 5, and we're looking at that. The registry is sort of a dream of ours to set up. The price quotes are astounding on those things. But certainly long-term outcomes is critical to us because we think there's many, many more benefits than just the ones seen in the hospital.
Yeah. So as you mentioned, right now FDA has basically zero piece of the pie because there's limited regulation. So I'm wondering, you mentioned lobbying for insurance coverage. I wonder if there's any type of coalition or any type of grouping with some of these companies to try to lobby also for more regulation, because it sounds like Prolacta is sort of pro-regulation, and I don't know what the general sense is throughout the rest of the industry.
We are definitely pro-regulation. And I know that's a weird thing for the evil profiteer to say, but we think that it's such a new area that it's required. It's got all the dangers of any other biologic, and the things that we do that you described, they're all voluntary to make sure it's safe. Now, we're regulated in two ways. So the donor milk is regulated just as food, but our exempt infant formula products, the fortifiers and the preterm human milk preterm formula, is regulated by CFSAN. There's higher regulations and higher standards there, and we get audited.
Right.
I would say that we are also very pro-regulation, and we have voluntarily filed with the FDA, with the Virginia Department of Health, and we would welcome the opportunity. And I was going to chat with Scott about, like, who is that retired FDA person that came and saw you? Because I think anybody that could look at our processes and give us additional ideas of what we could do better, different, would be welcome.
Yeah. And just one other question. You mentioned that there's a cost for the recipient. What is the average cost for someone who receives the milk?
So I just want to be clear, at least for our donors, there's no cost.
Right,
And that wasn't your question, but it seems like our pediatricians in the community can't quite get that. They think we're charging moms for their blood screening or for shipping, and we cover the cost of everything. And all of the milk is FedExed overnight on dry ice if needed to our institutions. Currently, our price is $4.50 an ounce plus shipping, and that basically covers the cost of all of the screening time, the blood screening, any of the shipping the milk to us, and then to cover just the cost of processing, storage, staff, all of that. We certainly are already, after a year of being open, looking at opening a larger facility in a brand new building, which would allow us better. We didn't realize how much ventilation issues when you start adding that many freezers in the processor itself. Our very old building is struggling to keep up with us, and instead of dumping $70,000 of renovation into this building again, we're looking at a new site. So,
and what is the financial cutoff for some of the recipients that you donate the milk to? Do they have to be at poverty level, or is it?
So we have all of that is kind of like part of our subspecialty routine already at the hospital, and I wish I could quote that off the top of my head. I can't because we haven't done it yet. I mean, but as far as milk in our hospital, we have relaxed every criteria that we had been using donor milk for. That if any of our physicians currently believe that an infant or a child in house would benefit from it, we're actually using it.
Oh, great.
So we have a different model. We never sell any products to individual families. It's all completely Prolacta to neonatal intensive care units. So there's no cost to the families.
Thank you.
Kelly Scanlon, Centers for Disease Control and Prevention. And I just had a clarification. Was the initial recommendation of the advisory committee for FDA, was it for registry of the infants who received the milk, or I understood a registry of the donors? Was that?
I reread that. It was unclear.
Yeah, I think it is unclear.
I reread that before this meeting, and I couldn't quite figure out. It sort of felt like some of the outcomes were about the patients, but my recollection at the time was that it was about donors.
About the donors.
Right.
But I think as I reread it.
Okay, and there are no registries of the. Absolutely. And so you answered the question about the infant registry. So I wondered, I was going to ask, are there any registries of the donors, for example, at King's Daughters?
There are not. And the American Red Cross, one of our consultants very early on, explained to us that routine that does go on with blood donation. And he kind of, counseled that this is probably something you all need to do.
Okay.
Yeah.
And then my next question.
Let me address that. We certainly at Prolacta have a registry of every one of our donors. So
Okay.
within all the Prolacta milk banks, that happens. The great next step we could maybe take forward is that Humana and Prolacta both contributed to that.
Okay.
Because if they were denied by Prolacta and then called 668 Milk,
You don't know?
yeah.
Okay. And then my next question about the
Nice plug for the number.
at your hospital, what kinds of supports are available for women delivering prematurely in the NICU support for their own expressing and feeding with their own breast milk.
So that was actually part of the cool process that I left out about when we started the donor milk treatment program. Prior to that, we started what they called was a BLISS team, and it was a bedside lactation support service where we recognized that we didn't have enough lactation consultants to provide adequate support for. We do not. We're not part of the delivery hospital, which is connected and next door. We're a completely freestanding, separate entity. So we partner very well. Our neonatologists obviously work both sides of the walkover. But our BLISS team and our neonatal intensive care unit really ramped up education for all of the nurses, many of the staff. It was amazing to me because that was kind of when I walked into the process. They had already gotten this up and running, and I was shocked because I did residency there. We left for 8 years and came back, but the culture and the passion that the bedside nurses showed for supporting moms was phenomenal. And our own breastfeeding rates by encouraging donor human milk and just having that discussion have skyrocketed.
Okay. That's great. Great news.
Yeah.
Thanks.
So I was curious about the experience of supplementing the term baby and the early limited formula supplementation study that had very few people in it but got a tremendous amount of press, has made the case that small amounts of supplementation can help sustain exclusive breastfeeding in the long term, and it would have been great if that study had been using donor milk instead of hydrolyzed formula. And I was wondering, how are you tracking how that works, and are you going to be able to get that out in the literature so that people can appreciate that option for the term kid?
I would say that it's a relatively new undertaking for us that these smaller hospitals are realizing that would help maintain their exclusive breastfeeding rates upon discharge. So we certainly do need to follow that and track that and see how that helps. We are certainly still in our infancy on that.
So at UNC, we've been able to get aliquots of 1 ounce of milk available for the term kid. So if you've got a baby with hypoglycemia, we've been able to distribute less milk and help more babies by having the smaller aliquots.
Yeah.
I don't know if that's something
we're doing 2 ounce bottles as well now. And yeah, I mean, once it's open, the nurses can use it for 24 hours and actually, as long as it's separated out, they are using I don't even know what you call it, a syringe that hooks onto the bottle that they can actually withdraw from, so it's not contaminated. It can be used for another infant.
Hi, Paula Schreck from Detroit. We recently weathered a pretty serious backlash in our city. Another for-profit milk, Medilac, actually came in, and the cooperative arm of the company came in through the nonprofits in our city and were encouraging mothers of Detroit to donate as a potential income stream, etc. And there was a huge backlash in the community, bringing of exploitation, etc. And it was quite severe. And there was a lot of concern that the mothers would donate milk in lieu of breastfeeding their own children, and that came from the community. And I wondered how, sir, you address that concern. Because the mothers that were in my support group really, that I had contact with, really didn't see that happening.
So we definitely have different behaviors. The mom that we want is the mom who comes home and has no room for her ice cream because the freezer's full. That's the mom we want. We certainly are a baby company, and whether that's a preemie or a baby at home, mom's own milk is number one in every situation. So one of the questions that we added to the questionnaire was of the pediatrician, is this mom breastfeeding the baby? And the answer on that has to be yes. We also don't take donations until a mom has X amount of milk. So 300 ounces is kind of the minimum. I think it's going to 400 ounces. And that represents a whole lot of extra milk that indicates they're not feeding the baby, but that they're storing up excess milk. And it's definitely a concern, and we definitely counsel on it. We have no interest in you if you don't have enough to feed your baby. You need to give all that to your baby.
Thank you for talking about this very important subject. I don't know if anybody else noticed on the map that you put up, there are no milk banks in New York State. we've been trying to get a milk bank for over 25 years, and they've finally given us permission, and we will have one in Westchester County. But there are two issues that are very important. One is the transmission of bacteria or viruses, and the other is the caloric content. And are all of your samples measured for caloric content?
So at present, ours are not. And that is something that we are in the process of looking at. Currently, none of the nutrition analyzers are registered with the FDA, or I guess FDA approved. Mirus, I understand one of the products will be later this year, but there are several. Most of the milk analyzers are based on bovine calculations, and we just have not been able to make the purchase or agree with the science thus far. I guess in our institution, we're looking at bedside evaluation and fortification targeted to the specific infant. But down the road, I mean, certainly we're looking at the option, and we wish Havana would move forward at helping us make some decisions. The milk of 3 to 5 moms is pooled, which we do believe helps with evening out some of the constituents that might be high in one mom or low in another. So, but currently we are not nutritionally analyzing.
Really, none of the analyzers are very good. Wet chemistry is basically the only way to determine it. So we of course use that. We have different capabilities. We find that human milk is 19.1 calories, 1.1 grams of protein. I'm going to get the fat wrong, but it's the most variable. And when you pool 500 donors, we end up with a very consistent starting material. But it's never 20 calories with that many people. So we concentrate it. We actually add cream back from fortifier batches to make sure that it's a minimum of 20 calories. I think the target is 20.8 calories per ounce. And it's something that we do because it's important. And it's one of the reasons why I was talking about labeling and calling for labeling, because it really doesn't matter what's in there as long as they know what's in there so they can adequately treat. I think a lot of the growth studies around donor milk that so punish donor milk were about small batches and maybe not enough caloric density to get the growth you need. So that's one of the reasons why the CR product is actually fairly important, and one of the reasons why we're studying it.
And then the NICUs, many NICUs aren't target fortifying mom's own milk. So if the smaller bedside units become available, this is something they could do for mothers who are bringing in their own milk as well as for donor milk. For us at this point, we're just not ready to jump in and duplicate the process.
Well, it's a very important issue because the original work feeding preemies donor milk or mother's milk were done on women whose caloric content was only 15 calories per ounce. And there are women who make 24-hour calories.
And I worry about our very large milk producers. I mean, we have one mom who's donated over 10,000 ounces to our bank, which is 85 gallons. And we know that the higher the production, often the lower the constituents. So we worry about that a bit.
And the other thing is the bacterial and viral content of milk and whether or not it's sterile. We were part, and still are part of, a large multi-centered study. The first baby entered into the study was a stable 26-weeker who got donor milk from a Havana milk bank. 3 days later, the baby died of sepsis. We cultured all the milk. It had the same bacteria in it. We ordered more milk from the milk bank. It had the same bacteria in it. And yet the Havana Milk Bank could not isolate it, and our own everyday laboratory was able to culture out the bacteria. So I'm concerned that there is a check of the product. Not only you're doing everything right, but as the product goes out the door, is it free of bacteria and viruses?
So all of the milk post-pasteurization, so every batch of post-pasteurization is cultured. Pasteurization does not sterilize, but we will only dispense culture negative milk.
Okay. Can you culture for serratia?
We can. Our biggest issue is bacillus. We know that, bacillus is just a nemesis in the canning industry and in the food packaging industry. And usually in the summertime, we know bacillus rates will go up. Most banks, I think, struggle with about a 7 to 10% bacillus rate. We had a little struggle last summer, but haven't had a positive batch since. But certainly it's on our radar all the time. And we did everything after those batches. We cultured laundry, we cultured ceiling ventilation, we cultured flasks, we cultured the dishwasher, and nothing grew. And actually that was one of our higher producing moms that we had concerns about her hygiene. We put her on furlough. She was the person that was the common thread through all of the positive doses or batches, and we never had another. So
we take a different approach. We culture every donation, particularly for Bacillus cereus, simply because when you're adding 500 moms together and you're processing 1,500 liters, I can't do the math into ounces, so I'm sorry. It's a lot, 33 times that. You don't want to take that risk. We find that the kind of plate you use makes a big difference. The Becerra plates are quite good, and then it's what you're looking for. If you're looking for 1 CFU in 100, 1 CFU in 1,000, 1 CFU in 10, or 1 CFU, there's all different testing. So I know we've kind of gotten our tests figured out, and we understand what the system can handle. And for us, the Bacillus cereus rates are somewhere between 15 and 18%, and there is about 5% of that is 1 CFU, so very low levels of bacillus. And it's a challenge. There's no question it's a challenge for the whole industry, but I think that this is where industry groups could talk about what tests are best, how to best practice these things. And we've actually found the Becerra plates have been good, except until recently, we just got a very funny bacilli that did not grow on the Becerra, but grew on the sheep blood auger. And we're trying to figure out, is it a different species? What the heck is it? And again, it was one mom, and we're lucky that we can trace mom to mom, but we're trying to figure out what that is, because Becerra's coming out and they're studying it with us because it should have showed up, which means we may go back to sheep blood auger and that NYP. It's a nightmare. But that's the nature of the business.
Right. And human milk is the best thing. So thank you both.
Thank you.
If we're going to be very sensitive to the bacteriological risks, I think we also have to acknowledge that there are cultural issues here. Today is the first day of Ramadan, so I should remind people from the Islamic Sharia law that we have the problem of milk kinship. Mother feeds a baby with a donor is not known. It raises questions of ultimately incest, and therefore in no part of the world where Sharia law is existing, and many communities even where Sharia is not formally existing, we have major problems in the Islamic community in refusing milk from milk banks. I wonder if you've faced this yet with Prolacta. One of the answers, at least to some imams within the Islamic community, to allow donor milk, not for milk banks, because that, is, as you say, pooled from 5 people. And in a paradoxical way, that causes even more of a problem. The question, if it's pooled from 500 people, there's no one identifiable source, and therefore that might be allowed. But in none of the Islamic countries where Sharia law are they willing to even contemplate to have milk banks. I imagine this is being an increasing problem within the United States and other geographic areas as larger and larger Islamic communities and populations grow in much more adherence to Sharia. I wonder if you could comment, Scott.
Shockingly, I actually have an answer for this. Dr. Lucas was doing a presentation in Saudi Arabia very recently, and we had put a mechanic together of what is constituted a feeding. And they were arguing that a feed was one full feed from one mom. And so then you spliced this up into 500 different moms, and then spliced it up into, particularly for Fortifier, a percentage of the feed. It came to some ridiculously high number before any one mom could have that birth claim. And I don't know if it's accepted or not. We aren't shipping product to Saudi Arabia yet, but it was a very interesting argument, and we're very sensitive to that argument because it's important for the babies, and I think the kingdoms are recognizing it. They're just trying to figure out if there's a way around that or a way to do it in a way that's respectful of law, Islamic law. So we're definitely in those conversations.
Okay. I think we had some good discussion there. Last time we had a talk about this. We talked about going to scale with this, how many thousands, millions of ounces of milk we might need to fully meet the needs of babies across the country. So that's another aspect of this. We're sort of in the infancy of trying to see how we're going to go to scale with all of this. Okay. Christina Clefane from the FDA, do you have any further comments about, I know you didn't formally prepare to talk to us, but I'd be interested in anything you have to tell us about your thoughts here with this discussion. Yeah, sure, that'd be great.
So I'm Christina Clefane. I work in the Office of Health and Constituent Affairs at the FDA, and we're a stakeholder engagement office under the Office of the Commissioner. So the FDA is probably kind of a big black box that's hard to understand for a lot of people, but there's different centers. There's for example, the Center for Foods, which regulates infant formula and other, nutritional products. There's our Center for Biologics, Center for Devices, Center for Drugs. So I'm in the Office of the Commissioner, sort of over all of the centers. So anything that's a multiple center wide initiative or communication our office would be involved in, or anything that's has a lot of press associated with it. So, and also in my office is the press office. So my role is stakeholder engagement for the pediatric and maternal health groups. And I think for this particular topic, it would have been really great to have somebody from our Office of Pediatric Therapeutics come and speak, and hopefully we can get a speaker next year. But there was so many conflicts with the DIA conference right downtown, so unfortunately they weren't able to come. But I'll definitely continue to follow the issue and bring in whatever subject matter experts are needed to address the issues. But I do foresee, like you mentioned, the issue of milk banking being similar to the blood banking, and just see sort of how that pans out in the future.
Yeah, and such a medical need amongst infants now, so that I think we're going to see more and more action on this, and it would be good to have agreement about what kind of safety concerns and as Mr. Elster said, to have some regulation around this so that we could really ensure safety and quality of product and consistency.
Yeah. One other thing I'll mention that's sort of off topic but maybe of interest is that as of June 30th of this year, the final rule for pregnancy and lactation labeling is going to be in effect. So drug manufacturers for drugs and prescription drugs and biologics will have to abide by this new rule, which if you're familiar with a drug label or package insert, goes over dosage, indications, warning, precautions, and it also has a pregnancy and lactation labeling section. And oftentimes that section is only basically updated when the drug is approved or when the company sort of sees fit to update it. But this new final rule requires that as new data becomes published, they have to update their label. So in turn, there'll be a lot more data about the amount of drugs and biologics that actually ends up in breast milk, and potentially could encourage more mothers to continue to breastfeed or pump even when taking medications, because we do know that most women do take medications during.
Well, as a clinician that looks at this practically every day, because so many of our moms are on different medications, that will be very, very helpful.
Yeah.
So.
Okay.
we have
Thank
some
you.
resources out there, but I'm glad that it's going to be more regulatory
Yeah.
requirement.
June 30th. There's a 3 to 5 year implementation period, so you'll see a lot of label changes. So I would say, I mean, I'm also a clinical pharmacist, so I would say that even if you've used a drug for years and years, if you're seeing patients to kind of keep an eye on that section. We do, under my office as well, we do have handle the MedWatch program, and we do put out every month monthly safety labeling changes that happen, and we do highlight those, and you can sign up to get that email every month. So if you have any other questions, come and talk to me.
Okay, thank you so much for being here.